course, one of those cases. And forums are structured not to debate anything, but basically to present information. And they're generally scheduled the first Saturday of the month, and we begin promptly at 3 and end at 5. Typically, presentations are about half of the time, and the questions from the audience are the other half. Today will be a little unusual in our format because after the forum, we will have a reception in the Del Mar House, where you'll have a further opportunity to talk with the candidates. And I wanted to thank everybody who's worked on setting this up today, including, of course, Jim Platt and the candidates. And as well, I'd like to thank Ted and Gretchen Chapler for setting up the room, and Bonnie Plakos for setting up the timing equipment, and Robert Diefenbach for doing the videotaping. This forum will be available on CD or DVD in a couple of weeks. The Custers normally do the recording, and they're on a trip right now. But if you're interested in getting a recording of today's forum, you can contact Custer at mcn.org. Just a reminder that the exits are along this wall and behind me, and that there's bathroom is down the walkway to the left. Our forum today will be moderated by Jim Platt, for which we're very thankful, and he will describe our format, introduce our candidates, and chair the meeting. So with that, I will turn over the mic to Jim. Thank you very much.
All right, good afternoon and welcome. We're pleased to have such a good turnout, and I'd like to thank again all those who are helping put this on. Our format is the following, that we will have opening statements by the candidates, and we met before the meeting and we selected the order of seating up here at the front by random lot drawing. We selected opening statements by just drawing lots, so the order isn't a factor here of anything. And at the end, we'll have closing statements, and we also met and drew for closing statements. So that's there in random order also. And our format is this, is that we will start where each of the candidates can address the audience for up to 10 minutes to give to talk about their program. Now, that will take us probably to about, if they take the full 10 minutes, it'll be close to 5 or 4 o'clock when we get ready there. So we'll probably take our 10-minute break at that point, and then we'll come back for the Q&A. And the Q&A format is that I would like you, to come up to the microphone, give your name, your lot number, and your unit and your lot number, and then speak slowly and clearly so we can all understand you. And we're taping it, so it's important that you speak into the microphone and slowly and clearly. The object of the questions are, it should start with, my question for the candidate so-and-so is. This is not a time to give us your position on an issue, the background. It's not a time for you to say, when I served on the planning committee, we always did da-da-da. So we're asking that you ask questions, and then there will be displayed on the wall a 2-minute timer. So you have 2 minutes to get your question in, and then you need to go to the end of the line if you need another question. And the people at the table also have 2 minutes. So we should move forward in a fairly timely fashion, and you'll see that displayed, a timer just about the Q&A. Okay, so we have up here at the table, and I know that I'm asking the candidates to stand during the Q&A, when they're responding, they stand at the table or come to the podium, but I know that if you're all sitting down, you can't see the person seated up here. And so, in the order that we drew here, we have Derek Bray is first, John Forenti, Debbie Tyler, and Chris Beach. And I'd now like to turn the time over to candidate number 1, and remind them we have a 10-minute thing, and at 8 minutes I will give you a reminder, and at 9 minutes a a reminder of your time. Okay.
Hi, I'm Dibby. Thank you all for coming. I really honor you for taking time out of a beautiful Saturday afternoon to listen to us talk and ask us questions. And I hope you'll ask really nice questions. In front of you, there are 4 candidates for the Sea Range Board of Directors. All of us are nice people. We're all honest, we're all pretty intelligent. Every one of us is offering untold hours of time to be spent in committee meetings, on the phone, emailing, studying complex issues. I sometimes joke that you have to be crazy to do what we're doing. But I think the truth is, we all have stronger than the usual desire to be of service to our community. All of us love the Sea Ranch. We all have the best interests of Sea Ranch at heart. None of us are out to sell our community down the river. So how do you decide who among us would make the best directors? I think you might look at 3 things. 1, background and experience. 2, approach to problem solving. And 3, and last, in my opinion, the position on issues. In support of my own candidacy, I immodestly suggest that my background and experience are pretty good. I've done my homework at the Sea Ranch. I've been a contributing member of a task force and 2 committees, and been willing to do the legwork necessary to take an idea from a committee to the ground. I think I have a reputation for getting things done. For example, when I came here, a number of people talked to me about the need to do a summary of the Comprehensive Environmental Plan. It was a wonderful document, but packaged not very well and 200 pages long, and it wasn't being used like it was intended. As a member of the Planning Committee, I agreed to coordinate a project to redo the Comprehensive Environmental Plan. It is now a 75 or 80-page document that is being used pretty routinely by the staff and the board and the committee members. And I was going to hold it up and show you, but I left it at my seat. You can see it after the forum. This plan won an award from the Northern California chapter of the American Association of Planners. And it's actually, surprisingly, the first time that the Planning Association has in any way acknowledged or recognized the Sea Ranch development. Now, when my children were young, I returned to school and earned a master's degree in urban planning. At the time, I was active in the League of Women Voters and in political groups in the town where I live, Palo Alto. Planning was a natural extension of my already keen interest in how communities function. After graduating from school, I worked for a consulting firm in Portola Valley for 30 years. My experience there was varied. I ended up spending probably most of my time on research in projects involving natural hazards. And right now it seems like a good fit for the Sea Ranch. We're in the middle here of developing an emergency response program, and I've been working for several years on a mitigation program for wildland fires. I believe my background in hazards issues at the community level will help the board look realistically at risks and establish priorities. My background and qualifications to serve on the board are outlined in my first candidate statement, and I'd be happy to elaborate or answer any questions. The The second thing to look at is approach to problem solving. My approach stems from two things: my training as a planner and a basic ability to think creatively, I think, because I'm not sure just how you define that. As a planner, my first response to any problem is to define the problem, develop a work program to address it, gather the information, do the analysis, make the recommendations. It's a pretty straightforward way of doing things. The key, though, to having a planning background is that there's always a public involved. You're not doing this alone in your own head. You're doing it working with people. And I think that's really key. It has been the key to my participation in the hedgerow rehabilitation program. It was my first project when I went on the planning committee here. We developed a plan for rehabilitating the signature hedgerows at Sea Ranch. There's 20 of them. And the board was already committed to the plan but didn't know how to proceed. Where do you start? Which ones do you do first? So we took on a project and walked every hedgerow, counted trees, and came up with a reasonably accurate assessment of the condition of each hedgerow. And from this, established priorities for the hedgerow program. But the key to this example is that before we do one thing, anything, to any of the hedgerows, we hold a neighborhood meeting, which is noticed and everyone's invited to come, and discuss what is planned for that hedgerow. In every case, and I think I've been involved in all except for the very first one, this neighborhood process has resulted in modifications to the project, and it's gone ahead taking into account the neighborhood views. On the other side of my 2 points here, that creativity is hard to define, and it is possible I don't have any. But I think I'm prone to seeing things differently than the conventional way often. And I find connections between factors that sometimes other people miss. When the bluff erosion problem first surfaced, I was wondering about the public access issue. So I went out and collected data from all the rental agencies, the Lodge, the Lala Point Regional Park, and Salt Point Park. And I did this not on any project, just out of curiosity. And what I found was that more people access the coast along the 10 miles of Sea Ranch than along the 10 miles of Salt Point Park. The development of Sea Ranch has actually been good for public access. Now, the various boards over the years since I did this have used this information in talking to the people. Okay, so let's talk about some positions. I'm a Pisces, two fish going in opposite directions, so I have every excuse to be wishy-washy. I do have the ability to see ambiguities in many sides of an issue, but I've never been called shy about expressing opinions. My second statement gives position on 10 issues that I think are important to Sea Ranch. And I hope you'll see a pattern that I'm an independent thinker, always struggling to find solutions to problems, and unafraid to take unpopular positions after I've studied an issue. Saying that, some of the issues. Budget. Tim and I are on fixed incomes, and we need to be concerned about rising expenses. Okay, this year's dues increase was too high, in my opinion, and I'll work to make sure that we don't have dues increases of this magnitude again. But realistically, dues are not going to go down at Sea Ranch. There are too many factors that work against that. I believe we can meet the essential needs of the community without significant additions to staff or additional expenditures. Fire safety. We keep spending more and more on fire safety. Right now, we're spending approximately 6% of our budget. That's of our dues, goes to fire safety without considering the fire department expenses or the water improvements. I think we need to look carefully at this expenditure, balancing it against other objectives in the community and other risks to the community. And I think my background is ideal in undertaking that kind of balancing that I think is needed. So please read my closing statement. And I hope you will read it when it comes. At the beginning of the week, I will be putting my statement up on the blog. I have a blog. I hardly know what one is, but I have one. And its address is Dibby, tsraboard.blogspot.com. I haven't used it very effectively, but I will put up my statement when I send it in so that you can get a preview. Because I think a lot of you know me, but you don't really know how I stand on issues. And if that's really important to you, I've given my position on 10 different issues, so maybe you'll get a better sense of that. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Bray, and I really appreciate this wonderful turnout. I wish we could have a similar kind of turnout for our regular board meetings. It would be nice. When I ran for election 3 years ago, I really didn't anticipate the extent of what that commitment might be. I did ask Rosemary what it was all about, and she said, the initial reply was, well, she spent about 10 hours a week on board activities, and then sort of stepped back and on reflection said, it's probably more than that. Having had that 3 years experience, I can agree wholeheartedly. It's a lot of work. I've been asked many, many times what it's like to be on the board. And my short answer has always been, it's been both exhilarating and somewhat frustrating all at the same time. And I'd like to explain that. Being on the board has opened up my understanding of how the Sea Ranch operates from both the policy making and an operational's point of view. Policy making is the responsibility of the board, and the operations are in the hands of the community manager. Both are ably supported by our many, many committees and a wonderful staff. I think we're very well represented in both these areas. We have an excellent community manager, we have excellent staff, and we have, I found out, to be a very hard-working board of directors. There's no question about that. And it's been my pleasure to have had the opportunity of learning from and actually working with these people, and I hope to continue that experience for another 3 years if you'll have me. I won't bore you with many of the issues we might be facing in the future. I think these have been covered to some extent in our statements and probably by some of the other candidates, but there are two areas that I would like to focus on where I do have concerns, very, very significant concerns. One is the budget. This year, 2008-2009, we're looking at in excess of 10% increase on the budget numbers, which is significantly higher than the average of about 6% that we've experienced over the 40 years at Sea Ranch. However, if you dig a little more deeply into that, and take into account that there's a surplus that's being carried over from this previous year, it becomes obvious that the potential spending can increase from just over $5 million to just over $5.9 million, which is not a 10% increase. It has a potential for an 18% increase in actual spending level if we spend everything that's in the budget. And there's always a tendency to maybe to want to do that. But in the past years, I must admit, give the community manager credit, he's always kept things down and we've always had a surplus to carry over. One area that perhaps we could cut on expenses is in the legal expenses. I don't know if you're aware of it, but legal expenses, if you add up this year, if you look at the budget, they come up to $244,000, the proposed year. That is somewhere around about $10 per month for every member. It's a significant amount, and I think we can do a lot better than that if we use a lot of common sense. We've got a lot of people around with a lot of experience that can be brought to bear on some of the issues that seem to be automatically given to our legal counsel to look at. The second area that I'm always concerned with is the CC&Rs. Where all of us here have embraced the CC&Rs and are expected to follow what are excellent guidelines. But I've experienced, both before I got on the board and since I've been on the board, that there are actions which go along, which have been approved by the board, perhaps under the advice of council, that don't seem to follow the intent of the CC&Rs. These particular actions have the potential to undermine the whole philosophy of Sea Ranch by establishing what seem to be different standards for the association as opposed from individual members, for instance. Two such examples could be, and I've brought this up before and we've had discussions on it, the design committee seems to operate in a manner that is not consistent with the way the CC&R specify. And some of our members have experienced that, and which has resulted in what seem to be inconsistencies in the decisions that they're getting, unnecessary delays and expenses, and possibility of legal challenges if they don't seem to agree. Second one is the issue of fire safety. I'm very concerned about fire safety, and particularly with trying to achieve what we call the 100-foot defensible space that the forestry guidelines have established. What I find is that the responsibilities for that defensible space at this point seem to have been put completely on the shoulders of the individual members. And the association is not picking up what I consider to be its responsibility for the commons areas and what we call association responsibility areas. Hopefully, the Fire Safety Task Force is still looking into this, and perhaps we can get some more detail from them before they disband in the coming October. I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you for your attention.
I'd like to thank everyone here today who took the time from the busy schedule to arrange this forum, which gives us the opportunity and privilege to introduce ourselves to the Sea Ranch Association membership. I'd like to thank Rob again for doing this and Jim for moderating it. Today I look forward to answering your questions and addressing your concerns, as you would like. But first, allow me to introduce myself and share some thoughts with you about the Sea Ranch. My name is John Forenti, and I'm pleased and proud to say I live full-time at the Sea Ranch at 41350 Deer Trail. Currently, I am the sole proprietor of a small consulting business by the name of Universal Ethics. In my previous life, I was an educator for over 35 years, a school teacher, and a coach. Before I go on, I'd like to make some things perfectly clear to everyone who is here today and to all those who will be viewing the DVD. With regard to my positions to a number of important issues, including but not limited to the following: the budget. I am in support of the 2008-2009 budget, dues assessment as constituted. And though I have serious concerns about the future impact of the 10.5% increase, I would have voted for it had I been a board member. Fire prevention. I am in favor of the fuel load management program, would have voted for it, and will continue to support future efforts to improve the program. Bluff erosion. I support without reservation the notion that bluff erosion, with all its geological, engineering, and political considerations, must be addressed with due diligence and all deliberate speed. CSD, or Community Service District, I am in favor of the continuing efforts of the Sea Ranch Association with regard to establishing a community service district. The Sea Ranch Water Company. I believe the Sea Ranch Water Company to be our greatest community asset, and as such, I am in favor of its continuing upgrade, generally and specifically with regard to the addition of tank number 8. Finally, it is my position that Community Manager John Fox is a visionary and has taken the Sea Ranch area of service and expertise to a new level. Subsequently, I endorse without reservation all efforts to support him and his staff. Having done that, let me say the following. I suspect that I'm not the only one in this room who experienced love at first sight upon his or her first glimpse of the Sea Ranch. Since my first visit here in 1992, the Sea Ranch has given me a great deal. It has provided relief from 100-degree August days in the central San Joaquin Valley. It has provided pleasant runs along the bluff and through the redwoods. Close-up views of wildlife that I really didn't think were possible. And it has given me time to indulge in one of my greatest passions, without limit, that of the game of golf. Mark Twain said that golf was a good walk spoiled. As much as I admire Mark Twain, I must disagree. Because no one's golf game, even one as bad as mine, could ever spoil the ocean view from the 8th green of the Sea Ranch golf links. It has been written that children are the living message we send to a time we will not see. As an educator for over 35 years, I couldn't agree more. However, I think that sentiment also applies to the Sea Ranch. The Sea Ranch is a message we will send to a time we will not see. What that message will be and the manner in which we send it will be our everlasting legacy to future generations, my children, your children, my grandchildren, and your grandchildren. Fellow Sea Ranchers, I have to tell you, legacy is not about success. Legacy is about significance. In Shakespeare's play Macbeth, towards the end of the play, when by all accounts Macbeth has accomplished and been successful in getting some of his goals accomplished, he begins to take stock of his life. As it is falling down around him, he laments, life is but a poor player, a walking shadow that frets and struts his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, the Sea Ranch is an escape from that fate. Alfred Nobel woke up some years ago, went to his breakfast table, picked up the newspaper, and began to read his own obituary. Now that cannot be a good way to start your day. Of course, what had happened, the story goes, is that his brother Ludwig Nobel had died. But mistakenly, they had printed his obituary. The obituary was a glowing one. It said that Nobel was a successful businessman, a brilliant scientist, and an inventor. But as he continued to read the obituary, when he got down to it towards the bottom, it also said this, that he had invented dynamite and made it possible to kill more people more quickly than had ever been done in the history of mankind. And of course, when he read that, he was appalled. And so it was that particular point in time where he took $9 million of his own money and set it aside for what are now known as the Nobel Prizes for personal achievement. You see, Nobel realized what Macbeth realized. Though he had been successful, he had not been significant. Folks, I'm not a successful scientist, not an inventor, certainly not an industrialist, and I definitely don't have $9 million. But I do have you, my fellow sea ranchers, and we both have the sea ranch. If I'm elected to the board, I'll do my very best on your behalf to send a message to a time we will not see. That will not be about how successful we were in dealing with the world of high-tech, budget matters, and membership dues increases which seem to bedevil us every year. But rather of how significant we were when we said to the rest of the world, we have chosen to forego a traditional lifestyle to live lightly on the land, not because it's a different way, but because it's a better way. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Beach, and why am I running for the board? My wife thinks I'm crazy. She lived through 6 years of it. But the main reason I'm running is because I feel that I owe my life to the Sea Ranch. I mean, the Sea Ranch has been my life for 43 years. I came here wanting to learn how to build and design. My father was an architect, and I was inspired by what he did, and I fulfilled that dream. I became a building contractor, got to build houses, got to design houses. It's because of the Sea Ranch that I could do that. And I think it's very important to make sure that the Sea Ranch stays the Sea Ranch forever. And I see problems, and I think that we're heading in the wrong direction. I mean, there's a lot of good things going on. We've got an incredible staff, and we've got dedicated board members, but somewhere along the line, something isn't quite right. I started back into politics. I had sort of taken a 20-year hiatus because I was just burnt out. And I got back into it because of the budget. I went to all 3 budget meetings, and it just seemed like we were just spending money without really thinking of all the consequences to it. And I don't think that we're that rich a community that we can afford to just spend money without really being prudent, fiscally responsible, I'd like to say. And so I started getting involved and started doing my research and looking and trying to figure out why we're doing what we're doing. And I'm sure that it's all being done by the best of intentions, but I don't think that we need a bunch more managers, and I don't think we need to be spending, in deference to what the other candidates said, we're going to be spending, or have the ability to spend, $1,162,000 more than we spent last year. That is a 24% increase in our budget. And hopefully we won't spend all that money, but it certainly can happen. And the impression I got from the board was that hiring the IT manager and an assistant manager was not decided not to do it, it was postponed to a later date. And if we don't pay attention, that's going to happen. I don't believe it's necessary. I would like to think that we can come up with alternatives to make this thing work without making the dues so expensive. A lot of us are going to have trouble living here. I just retired from construction. I retired from building. I retired from designing. And my retirement project is building my own house on the Sea Ridge. I've got about half done. I'm building it by myself, so it's going to take some time. But I'm planning to live here for the rest of my life. But I want to be able to afford it. And I just think that we can come up with a lot of inventive ways of getting what we need without spending a lot of money. We have our emergency management, for instance. I'm all for it. It's a good project. But at the present time, we're essentially paying twice for it. We're paying the state or the county in our property taxes $500,000 more for fire protection than we're getting back. If we formed our own district, we'd get that $500,000 back. With that $500,000, we could finance the emergency management program. It should be with the fire department anyway. We could hire full-time firemen. We could even perhaps have a paramedic. I think the biggest problem that we're facing, for all of us that are facing, we're all getting around 60 and up, is medical help. And basically, right now, we've got one paramedic on duty on the whole coast. If he's in Elk or in Santa Rosa, and you have a heart attack, you're toast. I mean, there are excellent, we've got excellent fire and rescue people that have saved a lot of lives. But wouldn't it be nice, for the same money we're already paying, to have full-time paid fire department? You know, not full-time staff, I mean, not the whole fire department, but full-time staff and with paramedic capabilities. I think there's a lot of creative ways to come up with solutions to all our problems without just pouring money in. And I would like to come to the board and try to find those solutions rather than just spending money. I've got a whole list of issues that quite long, actually. I think that I know that the design committee is just not working well. It's costing us an enormous amount of money. We're paying $624,000 for the design committee and environmental management department. Plus, we've got $110,000 for legal fees. And I certainly think that we can figure out a better way to do that process without having to spend all that money. And right now, when business is, building is booming, and it's starting to slow down already because of the economy. When building slows down and they're not getting any revenue, they're still there. And they're still going to be spending that money. And the long-range budget next year, they've got another, $30,000 or $40,000 to add to that. It's going to keep on going, whether they're getting any revenue out of fees or not. So we need to figure out a better way to go about it. And what I would like to do is to offer my experience to do that. When I was on the board, I spent 6 years on the board, and I was 1 year as treasurer, 1 year as chair. And I instituted a chairman's report. Some of you probably remember that. Where every month, I just write a little report, put it in the bulletin, and say what we had done, invite questions. And one thing that was sort of spurred the whole thing on is people would come to the board and, ask questions and start this debate, argument back and forth. And it was very unproductive. So what I did was I said, okay, you ask a question, and I promise you I'll answer it in the bulletin. And it worked very well. Because I think a lot of people have been disenfranchised because they don't think the board listens. I mean, I'm sure they do, but people think that, well, they're going to do it anyway, and I think we have to work to get more involvement so people know what is happening. For instance, if we are going to hire, a $100,000 person, I think that we should have a forum, and it should be explained in detail to everybody, and have a debate of the merits of it, whether we need it, we don't need it, why. I know it happens at the board level and at some committee level, but most people don't pay attention to that. So I think we need to figure out better ways to get more information to people so everybody's informed on what's going on. I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Now, we're running a little ahead of schedule, but I think it's, we will go ahead now and we'll take a break. It will be no more than 10 minutes. So please come back here at 5 to the hour, and then we will start the process. That gives us time to get all set up. All right, thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon, and welcome to the Q&A section. Let me remind you that because we're videotaping this, that you need to come to the floor microphone, and it's important that you identify yourself, say your name and your unit and lot number, and then you begin your question with, "My question for candidate so-and-so is." And then you can see up here that we're going to be ready with a 2-minute timer, and you can keep your one eyeball on that and watch it. And that will be and then I will remind you that you can't go past that. And that 2 minutes will apply to the response from our candidates as well. So they'll be encouraged to be concise, and we can move through the Q&A and get as many people as possible that want to talk. If you go past your 2 minutes, you have a second question, you just need to go to the end of the line for the question people, and then we'll be good to go. So, I've asked the candidates, I'm expecting that they will remain at their place at the table, but stand up. I think that's the least disruptive. So we'll try that, and if anybody's having trouble hearing or understanding, just raise your hand and we'll sort it out. So let's start. Could we have the first question, please?
Yes, my name is Russell Hardy, and I live 35A11. And I have a candidate. Sorry.
Now you have a chance to see what that timer looks like.
I've seen it. And I have a question for all of the candidates, and I'd like to explain the question. Because the Sea Ranch contract, the lodge contract post office, number one, can't accommodate everyone who lives here, and number two, because it's inconveniently located at the south end of the ranch. A lot of us have to live in a different postal zip code than our physical ground address. And because of this, we occasionally get mail that is misaddressed to our physical ground address in a different zip code than we normally get our mail. And because of this, we often miss important mail, as I did when the IRS last year misaddressed two official letters to me at 293 Bray Whale Drive, 95497, but that's not where I get our mail. This mail was sent back, and this cost me several $100s by the time I, finally got the mail. So the question is, this is a dysfunctional mail system. What would you do to fix this problem? And I think there's a short-term solution and a long-term solution, and I'd like to hear each of the candidates tell me what that is. Or maybe they don't think there's a problem.
All right, thank you. Okay, why don't we just start at the far end, we'll come this way, and this time we'll go the other way.
Well, this problem's been going on for a long time, which sounds like a roundabout not answering the question. There's a contract with the Postal Service that's actually a satellite to the Walla Post Office. There's been talk about moving it up to Verdant View. The lodge wanted to get rid of it, then they decided they wanted to keep it, so as long as they have the contract, I'm not sure what you can do. It's like, perhaps a 10-year contract. This is an old question. When I was on the board 20 years ago, we were talking about the same thing. I think with the proper common sense and talking to the Postal Service, that we could get a postal contract, put it somewhere around the Olson House, have a little tiny post office that we could have service at. The Postal Service, as I understand it, pays the person that's at the lodge, so there should be enough money to run it. Whether the association should be financing a post office for a small amount of association members or not is another subject. But I think it could be done without association money. Or if the association donated the land, maybe rented the building for $1 or something like that. So I can't give you an answer to the question, but that's certainly, there's always a way to do it. If you have the fortitude to go for it and the will to do it, I think it can be done. You can also do, like in Anchor Bay, there's these big banks of aluminum mailboxes that are outside. It's not as good as having a regular post office, but the association can certainly, or I'm assuming, could donate the land, say at the barn, put it behind so nobody can see them, can have a whole bank of post office boxes there where you just go and get your mail. I know it's done at Anchor Bay, so I don't see any reason why it couldn't be done here.
Okay, thank you.
I've just been through this on the Verdant View project, which got started in part because we were afraid the post office was going to be closed at the lodge. So we were looking for an alternative location where there was public access. I think the best solution is to have a private operator come in, probably in the Verdant View area, and establish a bank of boxes and basic post office services. They can do it. There is no constraint. It's a matter of finding a property owner willing to make an arrangement with it. The current post office at the lodge is not really a contract post office. It's a community post office, which has different status.
Right, that's not correct.
The postmaster is paid by the lodge, not by the post office there. And they're about 80 boxes short right now. They have no immediate plans to expand. So I think the best way is to look for a solution by bringing in a private person, probably at the Verdant View area.
I share your frustration. I live at an address with a zip code not consistent with my post office box in Guala. Recently, I got a note in my box indicating to me that I had an excessive amount of mail. Well, I understand that, and so I went in and I asked them, where is the excessive amount of mail I have? And they brought out a number of packages, which I understand were excessive, and you couldn't hardly fit them in the box. But along with those packages was a small envelope containing $4,500 that was being paid to me by an institution that I work with. So in the process of trying to locate the money, it was most disconcerting. I had to reissue another check, and it just got crazy. So I share your concern with that, and I've had some experience. A number of suggestions that I have heard that we might want to look at, all with upside, all with downside. I think a mailbox center at 3 locations, perhaps one at the Northern Inn, one at Olson Ranch, perhaps one here, might be something we want to look at. The downside of that, of course, is we're looking at a great amount of traffic that might be coming through that, literally car traffic. We'd have to consider that. Look, the other option that I heard, and I'm not in favor of it, by the way, are cluster mailboxes on the ranch itself at certain intersections. I just have to tell you, while it might be convenient, it's just totally unacceptable to me. But I'd be more inclined to look at several locations as opposed to one.
We live here full time, and getting mail hasn't been a problem for us. Occasionally we do get mail we have a post box number at the lodge. Occasionally we do get mail which is addressed to our street number, but I found that the people who are running that mail operation, they know who we are, and they will put it in our box.
Yes,
So,
but they won't do that if you live if you get your mail at 945445. If they don't have a box for you, they send it back, they don't tell you they sent it back, and you find out about it 6 months later when you get...
yeah, I guess my question there would be, somehow they must have got hold of your Sea Ranch address, even if it's not your permanent.
Well, who knows? I mean, the problem is we don't know how they do it. Okay.
Anyway, the solution, I'm not sure what the solution is. The idea of having multiple places where you can have boxes and use those, I don't know, I'm not sure that would work at Sea Ranch. The idea of having mailboxes at intersections doesn't sound very Sea Ranchy to me. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I think it's up to us individually to make sure people have the correct addresses. So
for all of those people who are clapping, I'm going to say that that's not an acceptable answer. You don't know how they had got your address. When we moved here, we were almost put into collection by PG&E or something, because they sent the bill to the wrong address. You don't know whether you have misdirected mail, and it's not, you do what you can to fix it, but if they send back important letters, like a letter from the IRS, you have no way of knowing they even sent it back. They don't even do you the courtesy of calling you and telling you they've got a letter for you. So there's got to be a better solution. I mean, I think telling us to make sure that we have the right address is not a good answer, frankly.
Okay, let this run just a second. Oh, there you go. I love this slide. Okay, Russ, I think it's an important issue. Now you've brought it up and we can focus on it. All right, next question. Thank you for coming today.
I'm Linda Klein, 1332. I would like to ask each of the board candidates a very simple two-part yes or no question. The Sea Ranch Volunteer Fire Department will be holding its annual Memorial Day barbecue on Sunday, May 25th. That is the day after the election results are announced. And my questions are, will you be in the area, number one, and number two, will you be willing to donate several hours of your time to working at the picnic? This will give you a wonderful opportunity to either receive compliments or condolences from approximately 800 people.
All right, last time we started with candidate Beach, so this time we'll start with candidate Bray and
yeah, it's very important. We have helped out in the past, my wife and I, and it's very enjoyable to be there ladling out the food or whatever. You get to meet a lot of people, and it's very enjoyable. And we will be, I think we're going to be around. So there's no way, you can put my name down.
all right, good. All right.
Just repeat the question. I'm sorry. The answer is yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
What can I say? Yes, yes.
You all have my vote.
candidates, what are the one or two specific things that they think should be done about the trail failure in Unit 28?
Excuse me, would you identify yourself, please?
I'm very sorry. Bonnie Plakos, 34C, 11.
I didn't quite catch the question, but can you repeat it?
I'm sorry. Can you please say what the top one or two recommendations are that you have for what should be done about the trail failure in Unit 28? What specific things do you think should happen there to fix the problem, or leave it, or not fix the problem?
Okay, now in responding to that, maybe one of the candidates can summarize the real issue, kind of tell us where Unit 28 is, if you can do that.
It's, we're talking about just the north end of Walk-On Beach.
Okay, please stand up.
Okay. My name is Chris Beach. What I believe she's talking about is the washout that's north of Walk-On Beach. You go down that staircase and you go north, there's a staircase down the beach. If you walk along the bluff, you'll walk into the water. It's been an issue ever since the Vane bill was passed and the trail was put in, but it's washed out, and there is no real alternative other than to go into Susan Berlager's front yard, which is acceptable. The Vane bill also states that they can't take any more property from us. So whether it's a county, it's part of the public access, which compounds the whole issue. So they can't condemn more land to take it, and so the county can't do anything except build a bridge or build a staircase down to the beach, or abandon it. And I'm not sure exactly where we stand right now, but it seems to be sort of a stalemate. We want the county to fix it, and they're not going to do anything. And there's kind of two sides to that. If we wait for the county, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, because that's our trail. I mean, we walk on that all the time, and the way it is right now is really a difficult traverse to get around it. So the question is, do we fix it or wait for the county? I don't have the answer to it. I think a bridge would be so expensive that it would be prohibitive. To me, and I've looked at it, my company built the other staircases, so I have a little bit of experience. If it was up to me, I'd build a staircase, go north of the washout, build a staircase down that little pocket beach, put up some signs saying, when it's high tide, don't go down there. And be done with it. I don't think there is another really good answer. We could shorten up the trail. If we have to go back up to the cul-de-sac and then go up. Now we have to go way around. There is a common area where we could do a trail.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, next.
I think we need to detach the issue of the public access trail from the bluff erosion problem and view them as, if you didn't have the public access trail, what would you do? And it seems to me we would be trying to prevent the erosion, taking out houses and destroying property of sea ranchers along the bluff in general. We'd probably be working with them on drainage improvements, which are recommended in the geotechnical report. Now, it isn't Sea Ranch's total responsibility, but it seems to me we ought to be working in that direction. We're at least a year and probably 2 years away from any action by the county. There's trying to find money now to do engineering. I heard a report at the planning committee today. Following engineering, they start an environmental impact report process, which is at least a year long. So if we get a bad storm, we've done virtually nothing to protect our own residents. I think we need to be a little more proactive. As far as the trail is concerned, I have favored all along a temporary solution is to simply relocate the trail slightly inward from where it is now on commons. There's a popular perception that right now you're right on private property. That's not true. There is room on commons to have that trail continue. That's not a permanent solution because of the erosion that's ongoing. But I think right now we're being, in a sense, held hostage. A lot of sea ranchers use that trail. This isn't a public access issue. It's an issue for sea ranchers and their renters and their guests. So that's basically the approach I would take. And it isn't a permanent solution. That's what I would do now.
Okay, thank you.
I think if you have occasion to go down to Unit 28, you should take the opportunity to talk to Susan Clark, who has a black plastic tarp flapping in the breeze, as I have described, like a child's runaway cart on a power line. She tells me she's unable to sell the house because of the bluff issue, if she wanted to. Look, there are a number of different ways of looking at this, as you all know. And by the way, I don't know if Mike Lane is here or Tom Cochran is here, the two geologists that did so much work to determine what the geological problems were. But I want to thank them. I mean, this, if you didn't get compensated, you should have been, based on all the work that I've seen that you've done. There are geological considerations. I've even heard it suggested that we put bentonite in there, inject the land with bentonite, which absorbs water. Look, there are solutions to this stuff. I mean, we can do it. My preference would be one of two things, to be specific, Bonnie. First, I think Chris accurately described the stairs going down. I see that, as I understand, that was the original solution to the problem. I don't see why we shouldn't proceed with that. The other option is, I think Dibby described it accurately, about moving the trail away and around. Look, that commons area there, as I've been told, used to have a trail on it. And I think it, and I stand corrected if anybody can tell me different, but I don't see why we can't reopen that, or at least look at reopening it. But the main thing we have to do is, look, we have sea ranchers living down there whose lives are affected dramatically by this. I understand it's 2 years away, but you know what? Let's try and make that a little bit better. At least let's try and get a light at the end of the tunnel in any case. It's unconscionable that Susan Clark or anyone living on that bluff has to continue in the circumstances. And I, as a board member, I wouldn't allow that to happen to the best of my ability.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, this is not the only area where there are erosion problems. Some of you probably noticed if you've walked the bluff trail from the park to wherever it is, the 3 mile stretch, there are several areas where there are notices which are basically rights to pass. That's where the bluff trail has been eroded away and the trail has kind of wandered inland. And sea ranchers now put the rights to pass notices, which means that they have a right in the future to close that down if they so desire. We're working with the county to try to find solutions for all of these, not just the Susan Clark area, but all of these areas. The Susan Clark area is the most critical. In fact, that's the worst erosion that we have. I think we're talking about two different things here in terms of diverting it. One, Dibby mentioned was moving it inland slightly where there is still commons available. And I believe there is. I believe there's about 28 feet of commons still available between where the block is eroded and the boundary of Susan Clark's property. The other one was the one that goes around, and there is an old trail that used to cut across the meadow, and that's been talked about renovating that one. So those are the possible alternatives in the kind of short term. Long term, it's the county's problem, in my opinion. Is the county has to come up with the solutions. They have to pay for it. The bluff trail is a public trail. It's not something that is sea ranchers' responsibility, but we have to work with them to try to find an acceptable solution. And that's what we're trying to do. It's very frustrating because they drag their feet and they drag their feet and they drag their feet. And it keeps on going. So when it will happen, I don't know. I really can't tell. I suspect it's going to be quite a while.
Okay.
I'd just like to, this is within the rules, is it not?
Okay, this is okay, this is within the rules, you can
Okay.
add that comment.
There are two Supreme Court cases, by the way, Nolan and Summa, that say pretty much we don't have to give another inch of this land away to anybody. And legally, I think we're within our rights to refuse that. However, if we wait too long, someone else is going to make this decision for us. Someone who doesn't live at the Sea Ranch. And again, I've heard it said we need to be a little more proactive with this stuff and get this thing settled before someone else sells it for us.
Okay, good. All right, we'll have one more last call.
Well, this is kind of a general geologic fact is that we lose an inch a year of bluff. And it may be 6 inches one year, and it may be ½ inch one year, but that's been going on since time began, and it's going to continue. And I don't think that we, or the county, or the state could afford to go around and be shoring up cliffs. I mean, you just imagine, you know, we're going to save this one, and we're going to save that one. I think what we're really talking about is saving our trail. You know, and every survey that's ever been done since the Sea Ranch started, trails is the #1 activity of everybody. And I think it's worth spending our money on trails. You know, if the county, I hope the county does it, but if the county doesn't do it, I'd much rather spend $100,000 on a staircase than $100,000 on an assistant manager.
All right, that's a good discussion, and I think the candidates should take note of what a sensitive issue it is. Let's put some thought into it. Okay, yes.
I'm David Boheen in 1991. Derek suggested extending the 100-foot defensible fuel load space around homes here when that space extends on the commons, and have the association undertake the clearing of that space. I'd like to, two questions I have about this really, related questions. One is, how much money do you think the association should commit to such an effort? And secondly, what could the board do about the rare case where the defensible space extends onto, say, a vacant lot, and the owner of that vacant lot refuses to allow the homeowner to have access to extend the defensible space to the 100-foot limit suggested by 4291, which is legally the homeowner's responsibility only up to his property line. And I'd like to know what the other candidates think about the association undertaking the commons clearing, and there are, I don't expect a precise number, but how much would it cost, and what would you do about the second issue?
Now, is that, so you're asking the question for everybody?
Yeah, I'd like to know what the other candidates feel about their suggestion, and an idea of how much they think it would cost.
Okay. All right, so this time then, see, John, you haven't started off a discussion. Why don't you take the lead?
I have to say that we had and have had occasion to clear our land with 100 feet of defensible space, and it was quite an undertaking. It cost quite a bit of money. I would be in favor of the association looking at clearing those commons areas and relieving as much financial burden on the individual owner as possible. I have to tell you in all candor that your question was nuanced, and I would really need a lot more time to delve into that and give you a better answer. But at this point, I only know from my own personal experience about the commons areas and about personal areas and when I'm required to clear away.
Let's go to Derek and then go around to Chris.
In answer to your question about adjacent lots which are not built on, if you look at the CCNRs, and I forget now what number that it is, it specifically says that all lots must be kept in fire-safe condition. So I think that applies, if we're looking at a 100-foot zone as being the fire safety zone, I think that does mean that the adjacent owners, whether it's built on or not, have a responsibility to do some fire clearance, which will provide for that protection. So that's the issue of the private lot. It's been my opinion for a long time that there's also something in the CCNRs which says that the association is responsible for commons, or association responsibility areas as well. It includes other things than commons. And in my mind, that includes fire safety. So if we were to accept the 100 foot as the defensible space requirement, which is what the forestry guidelines say that we should, then you have those responsibilities. There is nothing clearly written yet, as far as I know, as to what the procedures are when somebody wants to kind of get that protection. I'm recommending that we take a look at that, either through the Fire Safety Task Force or maybe through the board, and come up with those procedures, which should follow these guidelines and should also be consistent with what we have in our CC&Rs.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Well, like Derek said, it's in the CC&Rs that you've got to keep your property in safe order, and if a lot owners are willing to do it, we go in and do it and send them the bill. And when I was on the board before, we had a lot of trouble with people and their trees that were planted and growing up and disturbing people's views. We went and they refused to do it. We went in and did it and sent them the bill. And, of course, there was a lot of complaining, but it all worked out fine. Well, I mean, people get the message that you've got to keep you got to keep the trees trimmed to the height that you agreed to, and things like that. As far as the safety, the fire safety, I think it's a good thing. I think we need to do it. I guess wouldn't be proud to be. I'm the starter of one of the 3 fires on Sea Ranch. I mean, this is an admission. On a windy September afternoon, a nice warm wind in Unit 27, I drove my truck up there, dumped a load of lumber, and drove off. Got back to my office. Somebody called, "There's a fire in Unit 27," and that was us. And it burned about 3 acres. Luckily, we had a great fire department that put it out, and for some reason, the association had a guy come in and cut down all the redwood trees. The wood would die anyway. And I created views for about 20 lots. Nobody ever even thanked me for it. And I did pay the bill for the fire damage. But the point is that we're not in a real high fire danger area, but it certainly can happen. We saw what happened at the south end of the ranch. We saw what happened at Cruz Ranch a few years ago. And I think it's important for us to make sure that we take care of our fuel load and, taking care of the meadows with the sheep and so on and stuff like that. I think it's money well spent. As usual, the Sea Ranch seems to like to study everything to death and do all these fancy things and spend as much money on that as actually doing it, but that's part of the Sea Ranch. You sort of have to learn to accept that. I would have just hired an expert to come here and say what we need to do and done it in had it done in one fell swoop by a contractor, and then just had our crews maintain it. I think we probably would have saved a lot of money.
Okay,
Got water on the bridge now.
Dibby?
I'm not sure I can do this in 2 minutes either. In answer to the first part of the question, no, I do not favor having the association pick up specific responsibility for defensible space around private properties. I don't think it is an appropriate responsibility for the association. I think our fuel management plan, as it is constantly being rethought and reprioritized, is the way to define the association's responsibility for fire management on its commons. And it's being done to enhance the fire safety of all of us. And I think it's a very appropriate way to do that. The other thing that I would say is that I'm a strong proponent of a program that is, I hope, coming out of the planning committee soon to do neighborhood planning of commons. And I'd like to see us go through the ranch and take each group of commons in each neighborhood one at a time, work with the neighbors to define how we should be managing the commons on the Sea Ranch. And I'm concerned about this because
I think we're doing everything for fire safety and maybe losing other values that are really important at Sea Ranch. So let's look at it all, and let's look at it in an overall context. Start with the goals that are written up in the CEP for landscape management and see if they work, and how would they be applied if you really did this. So that's my solution. And I want to make sure that you all understand the 100 feet is not a clear zone. It's a management area. You don't have to take everything out. You don't have to denude the trees and take out all the underbrush. If we did that here, just stop and think what we'd look like. It'd be awful.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, next question. That's a very good question. All right. And I'd like to compliment the candidates and the audience for watching their time here. They're doing a really good job. Okay, next question.
I have one. Remaining.
Would you identify yourself,
Roy
please?
Austin.
Who are you?
Roy Austin, Unit 21, Lot 3. For many years, Sea Ranch has played a major economic role in the region. Many jobs across the river were formed on Sea Ranch by building, as Chris has done. And I was always in favor, both when I was on the board and before that, of providing jobs and to people north of the river as a means of a sociological sort of bridge. However, times are changing some, and I'm changing my mind on that. I'm beginning to wonder, since we spend about 70% or so of our money on personnel and full-time equivalents, I'd like to get your views on whether you think we should do more contracting and outsourcing as opposed to hiring full-time staff.
Okay. Dibby, you haven't led off yet. Would you like to?
I can't answer that question in a general way because it's so dependent on the specifics of the situation. Some jobs are better done by a full-time staff person. I think the issue came up for me with the IT information technology specialist. My concern there is that we have somebody, if we're going to do that, and I think that's been put on hold temporarily, that they be there for staff training, which seems to be, in my view, one of the really important aspects of that job. So maybe it would have to be full-time for a while and then go to a consultant. I think we have to be flexible about that, but it's specific to the circumstances, the slot, the job you're trying to fill.
We'll rotate this.
With regard to looking at FTEs and that sort of thing, I first want to say this. This phrase of FTEs, full-time equivalents, that's actually a real person, and so let's keep that in mind. I think at every conceivable opportunity, we should certainly look at outsourcing, insofar as it maintains the integrity of the work being done on the Sea Ranch. There's a certain, I heard Randy Burke talk about this in my conversations with him, and I've heard him talk about it to large groups as well. Look, when we have our own people do the work, we have full accountability for that. When we outsource it, we may get a price break on it, but the work we get may not be what we want. Look, the idea of increasing the budget 10.5% is not a pleasant thought. And look, I wouldn't want to do that again. I want us to look carefully at how we might reduce expenses and keep our dues assessments down, whether it's by outsourcing it or part-time, full-time, as Dibby said. Any of those ways are fine. But I don't want us to save money or attempt to save money on the backs of Sea Ranch employees association employees who wake up on a daily basis and do all they can to make our lives more successful and more pleasant. You know, all we need to do is consider the folks who stood down there at the water main break in September, all day and all night. You know, I'm not going to, again, save money on their backs. They do a wonderful job, and I don't want us to do that. On the other hand, Roy, I agree with you. Let's see what we can do about outsourcing, if it's applicable, if it works.
Yeah, I think outsourcing will have its place. It has to be very specific what we're looking at in terms of the kind of project that we need to get done and the kind of work. So somebody's got to be on top of it from a staff point of view. So we definitely need our own staff. Outsourcing has a benefit in that you can get the job done and then those particular expenses will go away. If you're not careful, if you kind of take care of it by adding staff, you're kind of looking at, I think it's been defined as budget creep, by adding people and then maybe not recognizing the fact that the job has been done and we need to make some adjustments. So there is a danger in adding more and more staff at a particular time because of a specific project. So outsourcing does have its benefits from that point of view. The IT specialist, I think, is one area that I would agree on. That this is somebody we could bring in as a specialist in that area, give us whatever guidance is needed, setting up the system, training for the full-time staff to take over. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Well, I'm not going to call it outsourcing because it sounds like we're sending it to Mexico, so I'll say contracting. I think it's to do with a specific job, and if it's a one-time job, then I think it should be looked at carefully to see if we're going to save more. We're going to save money by contracting it out, and it brings to mind that in the last 20 years, our staff has doubled. Yet by and large, we're doing the same thing. The only thing that I can think of we're doing more is this building complex here. It's the only change we really had. Yet we've got twice as many employees. And I know that there's been several occasions where we had one special thing done, hired employees, and they don't go away. And so from that standpoint, I think, you know, looking at contracting and what I would like the management to do, would you look at any issue and come to the board with a recommendation, you know, it's going to cost X amount of dollars to hire employees, and it costs X amount of dollars to contract it out. And you make a financial decision at that time.
Okay.
Joyce George, Unit 24, and Lot 146. So my question is this: every year we seem to lose a lot of sea ranchers because of aging, health issues, obviously losing a spouse, inability to totally care for themselves, and someday I may be one of these people. So instead of sending people to Santa Rosa and what is it in Oregon that everybody seems to migrate to, thank you. Every now and then we see a blurb on possible assisted living and what could be done on the sea ranch. Now I know that's long term and I have no idea how you would put all of that together. I'm not talking nursing, hospital, I'm talking about minimum care, meals, what you get in assisted living, meals and cleaning and that kind of thing. So I guess I'd like to get each of the candidates' views on that. Is it a pipe dream or something that could actually happen?
Okay. Derek, I don't think you've led off for a while. Why don't you start with it?
Okay, I know we're all getting older. I'm hoping that I won't need that kind of care for a long time yet. And so hopefully that'll be the case. I'm not sure what the answer is for Sea Ranch. I know there's been attempts in the past to kind of look at the possibility of something in Valhalla for maybe Alzheimer's type situation, but that fell through. I believe there's some talk about some kind of project, is it 29A, B, I'm not sure which it is, which is a kind of an assisted living sort of concept where the buildings would be built with the idea that you don't have stairs, you can have access and wheelchairs and that sort of thing. But I'm not sure of the details of that. I don't think there's any real plans formulated at this point. So, what do we have to look forward to? We had a recent experience of having to use 911, and that worked out pretty well. So, there are things that can be taken care of. I'm not sure we're completely at a loss, but it would be nice to have something better in place that would encourage people to stick around a little longer rather than have to go somewhere else. Sorry, I don't have any real answers.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure there's somebody in the room that remembers Heron Hill. That was a project that a bunch of sea ranchers started and wanted to build exactly what you're talking about. I was on the board at the time, and I endorsed it. I thought, this is like motherhood to apple pie. Everybody's going to love this. And we had incredible opposition to it. And I still, to this day, don't know why. That land is now, the Oceanic, the developer, was going to give us the land, or give the land to this organization, and build it, and it would have worked out great. I was thinking, hey, I will have to move someday. And it was killed. I think to get something, it would have to be a private organization that would fund it. There's a lot of, I remember right, it was a Methodist church. There was a couple of different churches that really were heavy into that kind of thing. I think it'd be great. I mean, there is a small one in Malala now, but it's pretty limited. So.
Okay. Dibby?
Well, I've been watching the 39B project for a lot of years, and when we wrote the CEP, we wrote in all the policy that would allow a senior-friendly housing development there. We've indicated that it would be an ideal place. It's the only really major piece of vacant land that can be developed on Sea Ranch. That it could be developed as a project, which means developed like the clusters or the condo projects.
Could you clarify where 39B is?
39B is is part of the old transfer site. It's it's east of the highway along Deer Trail. I do that every time. It is the second half of a parcel, the first half of which Fiona O'Neill did the design for 7 very small houses on Corn Lily and Cianothus, that area. And the same developer came in, has been flirting with Sea Ranch for years with a project for senior-friendly housing there. It's not Sea Ranch's fault at this point. I think it's in the developer's court. I think we have done the things necessary to make it a possibility. The key right now is finding someone willing to actually build the project.
To answer your question and address your concern, look, as a matter of enlightened self-interest, I think we all should be concerned about this sort of thing. I was listening to Dibby talk about 39B. That's immediately what came to my mind. Yeah, let's take a real close look at 39B. Let's look at all the issues with developing an assisted sort of situation for those of us who are headed in that direction. There will be great impact on folks, not just on a Sea Ranch, but close to 39B. And what will that impact be? And then how are demographics changing? In other words, who's going to be living at the Sea Ranch in the next few years? Is it just going to be us, or are we going to have a new set of demographics up here? I don't know. But I think that it's something that we should look at very, very carefully. And once again, as a matter of enlightened self-interest, we should take a close look at this thing. By the way, that's why we have 7 board members, because I don't think any one of us can do everything. And I can assure you, once again, as a matter of enlightened self-interest, that if I get on the board, I'll be willing to look at that.
Okay, thank you. Good topic. Next question.
Dean Wolf, 35E27 lot. And it kind of follows on this last conversation we had here. I'd like to see if the question is for each of the board members, kind of identify your major priority. What in a positive sense, what specific positive program, not necessarily cut the budget with that, but positive, would you suggest could add or enhance to the Sea Ranch, and that you probably promote within the first couple of months of your service on the board?
All right, good question. Chris, it's about your turn to lead off.
Don't have an answer for that. Well, I'll go back to the budget. Because the budget is the key to all programs. If we're wasting money, we're not going to be able to afford to do the good programs. And there's certainly lots of things that we, enhancing or fixing our trails and all these different things that we want, we should be doing. And we're gonna run into, these aren't sexy, but we gotta upgrade our water system. We gotta decide about the sewer system. There's a whole host of things that are gonna come up that are all cost money. And so it makes a full circle back to, we have to be fiscally responsible now so we can have the money to do this stuff in the future. That's my answer.
All right, thank you. Dibby?
I naturally gravitate to the things volunteers can do because I've been a volunteer at Sea Ranch and the things I've done haven't really cost any money so far. Watch out now. Let me just pick, I'm not sure what the most important is, but let me just tell you a couple of things that I haven't had a chance to talk about yet. One is I think we need, I'd like to pick up on a comment that I heard an architect make at the VIP meeting between the design committee and designers and architects. And she said, are we getting what we want from design review? And I thought that was a very provocative question. We always complain about the process, is it taking too long and is it fair to people and blah, blah. Are we getting what we want? Really struck me. So what I would like to do is turn back to the VIP committee a project to evaluate that. And I would do several things. I would do a survey of owners that have been through design review in recent years. We've done that already, but it's old now and it's under a different administration, so I'd like to update that. And I did do structured interviews with architects and designers that have been through the project and see if we can get a sense of what the experience is like. I'd go to the members and try to get opinions about whether they like what they're seeing or not. And perhaps we even bring in some outside architects or experts to take a look at recently constructed buildings. Maybe the design committee ought to go out and look at the results of their own decisions and tell us whether they're happy. I'm not sure what the answer should be, but I think it's a question worth asking. It wouldn't cost anything. All this could be done by volunteer effort. We have so many talented people here. Let's put them to work.
Good, good. Okay, Doug?
Dibby, it sounds like you had a conversation with Lisa like I did. She also mentioned to me the need to do a follow-up study, and I'd be in favor of that as well. By the way, having just recently been through the design process, I understand how frustrating it can be. I have to say that I respectfully disagree with the notion that we have a moving target. I think what we have is a very small target, and I'm in favor of that small target in order to keep the integrity of the Sea Ranch in place. The fact of the matter is that my concern with the design process was consistency. The same three architects I felt should examine my project all the way through. In a conversation I had with Lisa, the new executive director, she indicated I could do that if I was willing to wait for them all to be up here every single time, which might take the project, in my opinion, probably out 5 or 10 years. So we don't want to do that. But on the other hand, she did say that we have begun to lend consistency to the process by having her be the common factor in all DC meetings. That's good stuff, because she'll make sure that left doesn't become right on us, to use her words. However, with regard to the question, look, I gotta tell you, man, I'm so glad to hear it being presented, because we have a horse that's at the equestrian facility. And I think it would be just delightful if we opened that up and made it more friendly to sea ranchers, so that we could have events at the equestrian center. Look, my grandchildren come here all times of the year, but a lot of times in the summer. And what a wonderful place it would be for them to go to be able to experience horses. There is a program, a well-known program, for handicapped riding and how much effect that can have on individuals with physical disabilities. And I'd like to see us, let's take a look at the equestrian facility, not just as being a place for sea ranchers to ride, but being a place where sea ranchers can enjoy the equestrian facility.
Thanks. Gary?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer, because there are quite a few important things that we should be looking at. There's budget, there's defensible space, but the one that I would pick out would be supporting what we need to do for the water company. I think that's very, very important. I think of the water company as being what I call the crown jewel of our holdings, our investments here. And there are a lot of things underway right now, looking at a new 800,000 gallon tank to solve a lot of the pressure problems, which will help solve some of the, hopefully, the ability to fight some of these fires that we keep, I'm concerned about. But I think there's something that we don't really think about that much. It doesn't really come up for general discussion in general board meetings. It's more, the water board is, it's not there, but it is a very, very important thing. Without water, we are nothing. So it's very important that we support whatever the plans are. There is a 30-year plan now in place for the water company, and it's a very comprehensive plan. So I think that becomes, to me, one of the most important things that we should be looking at as we move along.
Okay, now that's good. Now is the time when we should start our closing statements. We put a 5-minute limit. I put the Q&A because it was very productive. We were having all the candidates respond. I'll let it run a little bit long. But let's go ahead with the closing statements. It's 5 minutes max. And we pre-selected our order. So why don't we go ahead and start with that now. And our lead-off person is Jonathan.
Thank you, Jim, and again, let me take this opportunity to thank all those who did so much to make the candidate forum possible. And I'd like to thank you all for being here and taking time from your schedule out of concern for the slice of heaven we call the Sea Ranch. As I was reflecting the other day on what it might be, what it might mean to be a member of the Sea Ranch Board of Directors, I thought it would not only be a position of great responsibility, but also one of great opportunity to be in a leadership position. I thought that many of you probably know, because you've been in a leadership position, how difficult that can be. I'm sure you've all discovered that no matter how diligent and prudent you have been, no matter what decision you have made, the reality is that someone will criticize you for it. It sort of just goes with the territory. And I'm afraid that everyone on the Sea Ranch Board of Directors probably understands that more than most folks. Unfortunately, from time to time, there can be a number of folks to whom no idea is a good idea, and all ideas are bad ideas. We call this group of folks in my business, the ethics business, cave people. C-A-V-E. There aren't very many of them here at the Sea Ranch. In fact, I don't think there are any in this room. But cave people are simply known as citizens against virtually everything. Now, they usually constitute a very small portion of the population, but they have a tendency to make enough noise to sound like 50%. And then we end up treating them like they're 90%. We call that the tyranny of the minority. And while the minority view should always be considered, I don't think that any one person or group of people ought to throw a wedge between sea ranchers who have so much common ground. And these folks, to whom no idea is a good idea and all ideas are bad ideas, man, can they criticize. When that happens, I think we should probably consider Teddy Roosevelt some years back in Paris at the Sorbonne, when he talked about critics. He said, it's not the critic that counts. It's not the one who points out where the strong stumble or how the doer of deeds could have done them better. On the contrary, the credit goes to that person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by blood and dust and sweat, who strives valiantly only to err and come up short, but who also knows the great enthusiasms and the great devotions and what it is to spend oneself in a worthy cause, and who at best will know the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, even if they fail, will at least fail while daring greatly, so that their place will never be beside that cold and timid-souled critic who knows neither victory or defeat. The notion of daring greatly, I think, was captured most by Lawrence Halpern, who wrote in 2003, "At the Sea Ranch we have developed a community based in wild nature and sustained by its beauty. We have an important responsibility here. What do we bring to this environment and how do we alter it?" I feel rather as a custodian than an owner. I feel I owe constant vigilance and care for its poetic and spiritual survival. I hope all those who follow feel the same. I'd like to continue to dare greatly on your behalf in the spirit of Lawrence Halpern. To do that, I'm going to need your help. I'm certainly going to need your vote. Thank you all. You've been so kind and gracious to me here this afternoon. It's been a distinct honor and a great pleasure. I'll never forget it. Thank you very much.
It's a hard one to follow. You know, I'm not a very talented person, but I live in a community that's full of talented people. The strength and joy of Sea Ranch lies in that fact. Over the last 10 years, I've had the pleasure of working on projects with many, many talented people who volunteered their time. And I'm going to mention a couple of them because it's really important that we understand the depth of ability we have right at our fingertips here in this community. Ray Jackman, a forester, still working on the hedgerow rehabilitation program as a volunteer. Each one of the planning committee, when I first came on, wrote an element for the CEP. They didn't sign on for that, but they volunteered and showed up and did the work. Mike Lane volunteered his time to create the maps for the CEP, which was one of his first uses of GIS on the Sea Ranch. Bruce and Susan Burdick designed a display which is yet to be appreciated, but they volunteered their considerable talents to do a display for the lodge. The lodge ownership changed just as we were about to get that thing up, and we're still looking for a home for it. And then Bob Hartstock, a designer, and Scott Smith, an architect, did incredible design work on the plan for the Verdant View area. They didn't get paid anything for this, and they put in hours and hours and hours of time. Very talented people. Pierre Miramont constructed a new case for the Sea Ranch model that's over here at the Del Mar Center when it moved from the lodge. He did that as a volunteer. He owns a plastic company, and that was his business. Jane Raymond, who's I think the only one I'm mentioning that's really here, took hundreds of pictures of houses at Sea Ranch for a slideshow the VIP committee is putting together on design at the Sea Ranch. And Thayer Walker, also a Sea Rancher and a producer of documentary films, is producing this slideshow. He's working on it today, I think. There's so many more. I'm basically running for the board on a record of my achievement at the Sea Ranch, but the achievements are not really mine. They belong to all of us. Almost nothing gets done by one person alone. We have a gorgeous ocean, the forests are magnificent, we love watching the seals, but we Sea Ranchers are the most important resource we have here. Let's not waste human resources in bickering and blaming. If as a community we stay focused on how to solve a problem rather than who's to blame, there's no limit to what we can accomplish. If elected to the board, I promise to bring positive problem-solving energy to the board. And I'm going to do now what I have a hard time doing. I'm going to ask you all to vote for me.
Well, two hard acts to follow. If I'm elected to the board, the first thing I want to bring to the board's attention is the budget, my favorite subject this week. And what I like to propose is looking into the feasibility of a CC&R amendment, which would state that we cannot raise our dues more than 5% a year without going to the membership and having a positive amount of members vote to increase it more than that. It's going to be difficult to do. It's kind of like changing the Constitution. And it takes 75% of the membership to do it. But I certainly think it's worth looking at because I think it will force us to live within our means and to look for creative ways to solve problems. So that would be the first thing that I'd like to see. It's way too long to go into all the things that, my opinions on all the different subjects, but what I want to make clear is that I've got definite opinions on the design committee. I mean, I spent half my life in the design committee, and in most every other subject that we have. And what I want to do is to spark debate, to talk about, and to think about what we're doing. And I certainly don't think that I should be cramming my feelings down people's throats. What I want to do is to be able to bring the subjects up and to talk about them and to see if we can figure out unanimous or majority decisions that are just going to help everybody and not just pass things and not really pay attention to what's going on. That's about it.
Well, it looks like I get to say the final word, eh? I'll keep it short. I agree with Dibby on the question of volunteers. To me, the such an important part of what we do here. It's, you know, I don't know how we could ever do anything without them. I don't know what the number is, but I believe there's in excess of 170 volunteers. A lot of them probably in this room right now. We have a lot of hidden talent out there, and I'd like to see that used perhaps to a little better purpose. It's my general feeling that there should be more open discussion with members and committees, volunteers, before the board proposes and acts on resolutions or policies that affect the governance of Sea Ranch. I think that's important. We've got to have open communication. I also believe, in the same light, that using that approach we'll get what I'll call a bottoms-up consensus of what people want, rather than try to impose something on the members. I promised when I was elected 3 years ago that I would represent the interests of the members, you people. And I believe I've tried to do that to the best of my ability. As a result of some of the things I've said, I believe that certain sensitivities have been raised on some issues which in turn have resulted in better and more open communication with the members. And just with that hopeful feeling, I would like to continue representing you for another 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I think we've had a very good forum here. We've had some really good questions. These candidates, I'm sure, will have to take those under consideration. I'd certainly like to thank the Forum Committee for putting it on, Rob Diefenbach for taping, and Bonnie Plagos for helping with the slide and timer. And I've been I'd like to give all our candidates here one more round of applause. Now, does the Forum Committee want to come back? Any final announcements, or can I?
I can just say, I forgot to say earlier, we're going to have a forum on the Living Well program next month on May 3rd, and that's the new program by the RCMS, which focuses on aging well. It's an integrated program, which I think will be of interest to many of us.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now adjourned to the reception.